chief. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. What? I heard that we here in the Union Square. Let's go. I heard that we here in the Howard Square. Let's go. I heard that we here in the Times Square. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Hello and welcome to the MKH Podcast. I'm your host, Maximilian Hill, and today we have a very special guest. Anu Kinhal works as an IP attorney here in New York City. He's a founder of Kinhal Law, a law firm that empowers companies to develop and monetize valuable intellectual property. He's a graduate of Syracuse University Law School, and he's a great guy. Anu, thanks for coming on the MKH Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Max. Thanks for having me on. It's really, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, and really happy for the opportunity to get to speak and kind of share my story a little bit with you today.
Great. We met at a rooftop in Manhattan a little over a year ago, and that was a really, really great event. It sticks in my mind because I spoke with one founder, and I had a notebook with me, and I keep a notebook with me because we spend all day staring at screens, whether it's a computer, our phone, or now our watches. And it stood out to me because I asked him to write his name and contact information on my notepad, and he literally could not do it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they don't even teach handwriting in school anymore. But I'll never forget that event because of that, a little story. But yeah, it was great seeing you.
I'll tell you one thing about your notebook in particular. To me, like after going to a bunch of networking events, the typical format is, you're there to meet new people and new professionals and connect. And usually you have like a conversation, maybe a minute or two or three, and then you kind of trade LinkedIn info by, someone scans your phone, the QR code, and they kind of move on with their day. But the way you approach things by actually having people like write their name and the contact info in your notebook, and then you follow up with them, that like it's still a year later that still sticks out in my mind because of how like purposeful and intentional that is, because it shows that you're actually looking to connect with real people. So
yeah,
great approach.
it's not an exact science. I know a lot of times you go to these events and sometimes it's just like, here's my card, right? Or here's my LinkedIn, people shoving their phones in your face. And sometimes it feels it's an unpleasant experience. But I have learned in my life and career, you have to have a network. And to network effectively, I think it's really more about, I have 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, like 90% of which don't know anything about me, right? That's just like accumulating connections. But I think the real value is, like I said, like following up with someone and building a professional relationship. Sure, it takes time, but all good things take time. As my friend Huram Kalimi tells me, all good things take time. So Huram is actually the founder of Vincor, a tech company, which I think you have in your work at Kinhal Law. You work with tech founders, correct?
We do, yeah. We work with tech founders from various industries, like the med tech, the AI space, and also like a few like in the with like in like mechanical invention space.
Very cool. So tell me what are your thoughts about the tech industry in general, where it's headed, opportunities?
I think, well, the first thing I think of these days with the tech industry is AI. That's like it's almost like reflexive to think about that, just because of one, it's in the general lexicon. Everyone's using ChatGPT on a daily basis. So I think part of where tech is headed is like having every kind of feature that anything that we've done manually being automated with AI. So that could be like one area where where we're really focused on. I think another area that really could see a lot of growth is in the environmental space, in environmental tech, because there's a lot of concerns with AI causing like using a lot of like compute power, so there could be like technologies to reduce that. So I'm actually excited to see any innovations on that side.
You mentioned in the prep for this conversation that before you decided to become an attorney, that you actually were considering becoming an arborist, right? You mentioned environment, right? So you have a love for the environment in general.
I do. Yeah, I would say like I'm an environmentalist at heart, right? So
Okay, very cool. Yeah. What made you consider being an arborist?
yeah, it's kind of like random. Like growing up, I had like so many different like career aspirations. It wasn't always like wanting to be a lawyer. But when we so I grew up in Sacramento,
Okay.
California, so completely opposite side of the country. And when I was in the seventh grade, we moved to our new home. So we
Mhm.
were it's kind of like a new subdivision at the time. And so there wasn't a lot of like, like trees planted or anything like that. So there's an energy company, SMUD, that had a promotion that every house was going to be getting 2 trees. And so we got like a really thick catalog of like which trees like our family wanted to plant. And me being the nosy kid that I was, I wanted to know what the neighbors were doing too. I wanted to know not just what our parents were doing, but like what our next door neighbor and theirs is doing. So that summer, I actually studied the catalog and just like tried to like memorize as many of the trees as I possibly could have. And that was something that was like, fun for me at the time. And I was like, okay, maybe this could be a potential career. So that's how I was initially interested in becoming an arborist. So that was one of my, I would say one of my first career aspirations.
Interesting. I think working outside is very appealing for a lot of people. And I actually just recently met the founder of an online game called treehopper.xyz.
Oh, cool.
Treehopper.xyz. And it's a game where I think it's you have to be in New York City to play it. There's 590 plus different kinds of trees in New York City.
Oh,
And I think you're supposed to take a photo of it and then upload it. And the first person to get there, I think, wins. But interesting game. But treehopper.xyz. So,
I'll check
yeah.
that out.
So,
Actually, that sounds really exciting.
yes. And I mean, all these games, I mean, really engaging games. I mean, very profitable. Very good business. Good, definitely good business to be in. I was in Portugal not too long ago, and I got to interview the vice president of a video game company. And yeah, I mean, you know, huge industry, gaming industry.
Yeah.
So, like, I know you had really good experience at IBM, right? And then you launched your own venture, Kinhal Law. So tell me a little bit about the story of Kinhal Law.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kinhal Law is basically we're an intellectual property firm. So we work with, a variety of different people. So, primarily we work with inventors, founders, owners of small businesses, and also creatives. So we help them protect, their patents, trademarks, and copyrights. That's kind of the general gist of what we do. This was, starting my own firm was a career aspiration of mine from before I started law school. So this is something like, I wanted to do ultimately down the line. And one of the things that obviously, law school is like perfect for. Um, but, you need, like, to be, effective, I think you need to have a good amount of experience that too, like varied. So, um, my first job out of law school was actually at IBM. So I
Okay.
worked in their in-house group in their in-house legal department on the patent side, and did that for about 7 years. And it got to the point where the work was still interesting, but it was becoming more and more monotonous. The days became more predictable, and I felt like now is the time to really like start pursuing the dream that I kind of put on the shelf. When I started really. And so like, the thing about being an entrepreneur, as as many people can relate, is there's no like good time to start. You just have to just make a decision and just go for it. So that's kind of what I did. And we've been in business for about a year now. I think beginning of February was officially our first year. So that was a lot of, it was fun. It was challenging. Got to learn a lot of things about how to run a business first, and then also, how to like, handle clients and other things that come with managing a firm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, they wait till the perfect time to start." But I think the reality, there's never a perfect time. Like, you never have enough experience, you never have enough money, you never have enough time. It's just you gotta get started, get your butt beat a little bit, and but you learn so much, I think, by doing, rather than sitting on the sidelines or in school. Not that there's anything wrong with school, but I think there's nothing that can beat hands-on learning. So Congratulations on being on 1 year in business. That's a
Thank
huge.
you.
Um, so what advice would you give maybe someone who's considering, making the jump from a big company to running their own thing? And looking back, is there anything that if you could have it over, that you might have done differently?
Yeah, I guess one is like, know why you want to do it. I mean, for me, part of the reason I wanted to have my own firm was the independence of being able to kind of work on the cases and subject matter that I found interesting, not just something that was like kind of handed to me to do. So that was there was that escaping the bureaucracy that was obviously something that I wanted to be able to do, and just having a chance to work on like a variety of different types of work. Being in a company, you tend to deal with, the people that you've, even within a large company, there's a certain type of, uh, person that you typically work with. Once you're out in the real world in a firm, I feel like, you never know who you're going to deal with. Some people are very easy to work with. Some people need, managing, and, it's fun to kind of like build those skills and grow in that way personally and professionally. So I guess the first thing is like know why you want your own firm, not just to don't just start it just to start it because you think it's a good idea, because there is a lot of challenges, and if you don't have that why fully defined, it's not going to be, a rewarding experience, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned working with difficult people. That's a topic I think that is front of mind for many people.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Work is changing at such a breakneck pace. Some people handle it better than others. Tell me about a time you worked with someone who you would consider difficult and how you handled it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I'll try to keep it a little bit more anonymous. But this was kind of in like the enforcement space. I was dealing with a litigation client. It was something that I hadn't really done before. This is something that was like relatively new to me, and um, part of what it was, part of the difficulty in the client was what their expectations were versus what the reality actually was. So for me, like a lot of managing that particular client was, really like, educating them on what their situation was, what it looked like, what the, beyond like what this is what the law is, this is, the outcome. Because things aren't always that simple. If it was, it would have been, resolved, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, there's a lot of like educating the client, really letting them, know the consequences of the decisions that they're going to be making. And then once, they can start picturing those consequences with more clarity, then they can start understanding like the direction that you want to, counsel them towards. So I felt like that was a good opportunity to kind of, you know, take on a more difficult client, but also get them a good result in the end by like, clearly communicating with them and really just keeping them on board for like every step of the way.
So much I've learned is about good communication, regardless of what line of work you're in. If you're a strong communicator, it solves so many problems. I mean, of course, you have to be competent at what you do, but I've worked with people who are bad communicators, and it just makes everything much more challenging. You
And also
mentioned,
being, like realistic with your expectations, because naturally I feel like I'm an optimist. So I was like, if I'm like, there's a 1% chance this is gonna happen, I'm like, it's gonna, that it's headed in that direction. That's kind of how I naturally like operate for myself.
Mhm.
With clients in their situations, they're in a position where, they either need to like, protect their IP assets through like, they don't know if they can actually get a patent or not, or if someone is suing them for infringement, they don't know if they're going to be successful and have to pay out a lot of money. So, for them, you can't rely on that, that 1% being super optimistic. You have to be like very real with them and, have the courage to be able to explain in very clear terms what their situation is. Because one thing I've learned is like, people do respect that, and they understand, you're not creating those circumstances, that's just what it is.
Yeah. You mentioned ChatGPT
Mhm.
um, earlier in the conversation. Uh, how have you leveraged technology and AI in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do use AI in my practice. I think it's kind of important to start integrating AI. For me, I don't use ChatGPT as much for like my day-to-day, like like for the actual legal work. There are like tools that uh that legal research sites provide, like LexisNexis, for example. They
Hmm.
have their own AI tool. So for me, like I use that as a starting point to do my legal research. So if I need to deep dive, get a deep dive on some area of the law, I can have like a good prompt that'll get me started. So I'll know, okay, these are the treatises that I need to look at to get, a sense of what, the actual law is, and then I can peel back the next layer and say, okay, these are the court cases that I need to look at, and then I can peel that back and sort them by relevancy. So it's a great way to kind of get that first step, and it makes, if you can save yourself a couple hours each time, that's a huge savings every single day, right?
Yeah, and it adds up. I mean, and time is money. As the owner of a law firm, I'm sure you know all about billable hours. And you mentioned court cases, right? Right now, there's a lot of court cases in Washington, D.C. What are your thoughts on what's going on in D.C. right now?
I guess there's so much going on. It's like, where to really start. For one, like I have a lot of friends who are, who work in the federal government. So for me, seeing them, as talented and amazing as they are, just being let go for no reason is a little heartbreaking to see. It feels kind of random and unnecessary. So that's kind of like the first thing that I would say.
Yeah, it does seem random and unnecessary. And I mean, there's always hypocrisy in politics, right? And you see Elon Musk is making all of these cuts to government contracts and everything, but guess which company did not have their contract cut? Uh, you know, Tesla. But I mean, challenging time, definitely for sure. I think I mean, a lot of people are going to have to learn uh, really quickly how to pivot, transferable skills. Yeah, it's an interesting time. I think. Did you watch the address that Trump gave 2 nights ago?
I did. I saw about the first hour. I tuned out the remaining, half hour.
Yeah.
Uh, Partly because I was curious, well, it's a joint session of Congress, so naturally, it's a historical moment. You want to be, there to witness what he has to say. And for me, like it was just, I don't know, I couldn't stomach a lot of what was being said because it was mostly, lies being told.
Lies. Yeah. I mean, I think even people who support him, they acknowledge that he lies because he does it so habitually,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know. I mean, honesty, I think, is really important, um, even in small things. But it's just shocking to me how the leader of the free world is so openly dishonest. But hey, it is what it is. Um, so one of the things that I like to do with my podcast guests is talk about maybe a book recommendation or a podcast or maybe a blog or social media account that you would recommend that had like an impact on you that you would recommend to others.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two. I have a book and I have a podcast recommendation. So the book recommendation for me is this is an all-time classic. I think it's a must read for everybody. It's The Godfather. I think it's one of the best written books out there.
Hmm.
And what it really taught me was the art of subtlety and the fact that you can convey a message without saying too many words. And I feel like in the legal practice, it's a very applicable skill, right? It teaches you how to like, observe a situation and know how to act without being, overly like, expressive. And I feel like that kind of lesson also fits my personality a little bit too. So that was a great book to read. And also, it's a classic, even if you don't get that lesson from it, it's a book about like the mafias, in early New York City. So it's very interesting just on its own. But there's a lot of great lessons to be had from there.
Yeah.
Uh, the podcast recommendation I would give actually ties into one of my hobbies. So one thing I love to do is I love to write. So I love to write short stories in my free time. And so this podcast was actually the inspiration for the type of stories that I write now.
Hmm.
Podcast is called Everything is Alive. It's a fun listen. Each episode centers around like an inanimate object, and it's that inanimate object is being interviewed as if it has its own perspective. And so it's kind of interesting to see, okay, if you were just some like one example is like one of the episodes called like I think a Lewis can of cola. So it's like a soda can that's been sitting in the back of the fridge, just getting cold over the years. And it's like wondering how come no one's like cracking me open and drinking me. I'm ready to go. So it's just funny to like hear those kinds of perspectives that a random object would have. And for me, like it helps me, flex my creative juices a little bit because being on the tech side you're very like hyper technical, every part has to work and all these components need to fit exactly, but you don't necessarily think on the ridiculous side. And so I feel like this helps me uh kind of reach the other side of my brain, I guess.
Yeah, that made me think of a podcast that my friend Jay Gal is. I think he's launching. I don't know if he's launched it yet, but it's called "What's That on Your Desk?" and
Oh, okay.
he interviews people about objects that are on their desk. All right,
Oh, cool.
because there's a story behind it. Like for me, I have my little globe here,
Oh,
right?
cool.
Because I think it's very important that we all travel, and it's like my daily reminder to get out there and experience, the world because life is short, and I think there's really no education like travel. I think
Okay.
um, when you're dealing with people from different place, different culture, different language, you learn so much, uh,
Okay.
learning by doing, you know. But yeah, I
Oh,
think.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I just got back from Lisbon.
Oh, you did? Okay.
This was my first time in Portugal,
Well,
and
how long ago were you there?
I think I was there maybe 3 weeks ago, and still kind of just uh, you know, such a completely different world. So still coming down from it, but I got to meet a couple of my LinkedIn connections that I've made over there, and that's the beauty of social networks like LinkedIn is you can start a conversation with literally everyone and
Yeah.
anyone, and then we find a way to meet them, and you're like, yeah, it's a real person, and that's definitely an approach that I've taken. I think that helps me become an effective networker is knowing that there's a human on the other side, right? They're not just likes or comments, right? It's an actual human, right? And um, but yeah, if I ever get on that show, that's going to be the top the what's that's going to be the topic for what's that on your desk.
That,
So
that that's a great question.
yes, everything is alive. Very good. So we'll definitely have to check out that podcast. So yeah, I do have some more questions about entrepreneurship and your experience launching your own firm. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah.
how did you get your first client or first couple of clients?
Yeah, that's like the most important question, I think, because that's what everyone's asking. My parents included when I told them, this is what I'm doing, transitioning from my very stable job to this, and they're like, okay, so how are you going to get a client? And I didn't have like a concrete answer to them. I told them what I thought what was the right answer, and that was like, okay, well, advertising, networking, etc. And then it comes time to actually doing it, and then the reality kind of sets in. But for me, luckily, I had a little bit of luck and kind of met one of my first clients at a networking event. And it was just like perfect serendipity because he was looking for an IP attorney and I was there. We talked and connected,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, but that doesn't happen every time and I don't think it
It
should happen.
doesn't. You're right. Most networking events, it doesn't. But I'll say this: you and I happen to be very fortunate to live and work in and around New York City.
Absolutely. Yep.
And uh, one thing I've learned is life is not fair, right? And a networking event in, say, I don't know, Iowa City is not the same as a networking event in Manhattan. Um,
Fair.
and it's just the way the math works, right? There's, the brightest minds, they're either in Silicon Valley or New York City, right? But with the advent of remote work, they could be anywhere, right? So you have online networking events. But if you're talking strictly in-person networking events, I mean, every time I go to a networking event in Manhattan, I meet someone interesting. Maybe not someone that I'm going to work with, right? Because it is a crapshoot, but there's always interesting people that I meet. And, you know, a hero of mine, one of the things that he said was the value of your network increases exponentially when you introduce people, right? And they meet through you, right? So I always try to keep people in mind. So, you know, the tree hopper guy, right? That's, you know, I might introduce you to him.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't need an attorney, but you know, you guys both have a common interest.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but that is good. You actually a little serendipitous. You met that's awesome. I know there's no shortage of founders here in New York City. So, how have you found the tech community to be in New York City here?
I think I find the tech community generally to be pretty like optimistic. I feel like everyone has like their idea of what they want to do. The sense that I kind of got is like, everyone is trying to be in the AI space. And, for me, trying to like suss out like what the details of their AI is, or if they're doing something to improve the underlying AI technology, like if that's what they're doing. And my sense is that, a lot of people are trying to create applications of AI from already existing technology. So I feel like that's kind of the scene right now. At least that was the impression that I got.
Yeah, it was like the .com era where every company became a .com company.
Yeah.
And it's really, you know, marketing. It boosts the valuation. You know, I don't think there are very many companies that are truly AI companies, right? I mean, but every company is touting how AI can, or how they're incorporating AI into their business.
Right.
A little disingenuous, I think, but I mean, it's to be expected. It is literally like, talk about buzzword exhaustion. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, well, one sentiment that's going around is like, AI is going to replace professionals, like attorneys, for example. And so like for me, like that's always something that's very like that I'm skeptical about. Because like, however, advanced, at least generative AI has been, it can't fully replace like, judgment, at least as of yet. And for me, like I always tell people, the value of an attorney is not just in like, what info they can tell you about like what areas of law is, because there's a lot of people that know how to like, they know how to research, and they know like, general terms, and they can, find out what they need to from that. So if they need, attorney just for general like definitions, or just a basic, basic counsel from stuff that's already out there online, then you don't really need an attorney. You just need to Google a little bit better, right?
mhm,
You want to know, how to like actually like, if you're trying to patent something, if you want to trademark, for example, you want to rely on their experience on how they can actually navigate the registration process or the application process, and how you can actually draft a patent that survives scrutiny, right? Because it's not just, getting it through the patent office, it's actually practicing it out in the real world.
mhm,
So you want to, enforce your patent against potential infringers, do you have claims that are airtight and enforceable? Or do you have something that can be invalidated easily?
mhm,
Those aren't things you could really just Google, right? That's something you need an attorney for. And AI can't necessarily make that determination because, one, it's subjective. And two, it really depends on what evidence others can find to like enforce against you, right?
mhm.
That's not something you could just type into a prompt and just have that pop up. At least we don't have that now, right?
Yeah. No, that's I think, you know, judgment will always be valuable. Um, the way I look at AI is, and the example that I used was the ATM, right? When the ATM came out, they said, "Oh, bankers are going to be out of jobs," right? But what happened, I think what really, if you look at it, you know, there was an ATM on every corner, right? And that allowed the banks to open up branches everywhere, right? And so, sure, you know, bankers still had jobs. The job changed,
Yeah.
but um, that's one of the things about the value of studying history. You know, I didn't really appreciate it when I was in school, but as I've gotten further in my career, there's so much value in understanding history because, you know, the widgets change, the industries change, but human nature never does.
Right.
And I think AI is really going to make a lot of the mundane tasks redundant, which, hey, that's a good thing, right? I mean, cubicle slavery is over, right? And I think, you know, you have to, the professionals who embrace AI and use it as a tool, like a partner, are going to smoke the people who refuse to learn about it. Um, you're also a
Like
graduate.
the phrase, it's people using tools, right? So it's the AI is a tool. It's us as the people who are constantly going to be using those tools. So there's always a value and a utility in the person doing the work. So I think that will remain inherent regardless of what that tool is or how advanced it becomes.
Yes, I think I'm reading a book. I'm reading a dummies book on AI.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. Okay.
and I think I love the dummies
Mhm.
books. There's so much value in them. And one of the things they did was they mentioned there's different kinds of intelligence, right? There's like mathematical intelligence, creative intelligence, physical intelligence. There are several others. I don't recall all of them, but one of the things they broke out all the different kinds of human intelligence, right? And they said mathematical tasks will be, dominated by AI because that's what they're good at, right? But creative tasks will not be, right? Because that's uh, the human's wheelhouse, right? So I think we all have to tap into our creativity, and we're all creative. Some of it's lies dormant, but I think I welcome AI. I think it's going to be a good thing overall. Um, and yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was in Lisbon, I was in a laundromat, and the whole all of the instructions for the machines was written in Portuguese, right? And I don't really know any Portuguese. I assumed correctly that enough people there speak English so
Yeah.
you can, and then the gaps that are left, I use Google Translate. Uh,
Okay.
and then in this instance, I took a photo of the instructions,
Yeah.
right? And I just plugged it into ChatGPT, and instantly it said everything
Yeah.
in English. And it's like, I think it's a good thing, definitely think it's a good thing. So, all right, change the subject real quick. You're a graduate of University Cal Berkeley. There's one famous graduate of Cal Berkeley here in New York City. His name's Aaron Rodgers. Do you think he's gonna find a home next year for the NFL, in the NFL, or is he done? What do you think?
That's a good question. I saw like a tweet a while back. I think he was like hinting. I think it was like a meme that either he posted or someone posted that he liked or something like that, showing like, someone driving from one parking lot to the other side of the parking lot. And the people were kind of guessing like, okay, is he going to the Giants just based off of that tweet?
Yeah,
So the answer to that might be yes. It very well could be he has a home like in New York, possibly, if he's looking to move over to the Giants. Because I know they have a quarterback gap that they
they
need.
they do have an opening. I don't know. I mean, they're gonna have a high draft pick, and I mean, I would like for them to just, maybe they, sign him to a 1 year contract and he could be a mentor for whoever they draft. But all I know is the Giants have been terrible for too long, and they need to step it up. So, all right, last question.
Are you a Giants or a Jets fan?
I'm actually a Giants fan,
Giants
so
fan. Okay, fair enough.
yeah. Last question for you. If you could have a billboard in Times Square and it say anything 10 words or less, what would it say?
Interesting. If I was going just for fun, I would say Kobe over LeBron. That's what I would. But if you want to be inspirational, I would say always keep going. You know that's something that I feel like is important to know. Like regardless of what you're doing, perseverance is like second to none, right? So
Yeah, and it's very important for someone like yourself who's in the startup grind. So I'm sure there have been times where you're like, man, this is tiring, but
I think it's important to like know that progress looks different for everyone. And kind of like going back to like I think one of the points that we were making earlier in the podcast was there's no right time to start. And I think one thing that's important for people to know is how you start is different than how someone else starts. So like
right.
starting point itself is kind of your own journey. So you have to figure out how to get to step two, step three, step four, and that could be very different than someone else's step two or step three, right?
So wonderful. No,
Regardless of where that is, like you have to figure out your next step and then just keep going down that path. So I'll always keep going.
great feedback for sure. Anu, I think that's all the time we've got for today. But if I meet any founders that need an IP attorney, I will be sure to recommend them to you.
Oh, I
And
love that. Thank you, Max.
keep in touch. We really appreciated having you on the podcast, and would love to have you on again to talk politics, to talk technology, travel, all these different topics. So, all right, Anu, thank you so much, and you have a good one. All right.
Oh, you too, Max. Thank you so much.
Yo, I heard that we hitting that 42nd, let's go. I heard that we hitting that 34th, let's go. I heard that we hitting that 14th, let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. What? I heard that we hitting that Union Square, let's go. I heard that we hitting that Howard Square, let's go. I heard that we hitting that Times Square, let's go.